Okay, I'm going to need your help. If you're going to cry, look down. This may be tough. Libby and I had a lot of time to discuss this service. For the past 2 months, she was confident she did not want a traditional funeral. She said, I don't want people to mourn. I want them to rejoice. She said, I want them to celebrate my life. So in keeping with that, I'm going to tell a few stories about Libby. I think I can get this done. It's something she asked me to do. You know, this is not how it was supposed to happen. I was supposed to die first. We had it planned out. Because statistically, that's how it works. The male always dies first. So we spent time putting stuff into files so that she would know what to do when I died. I gave Jared the files at the office so he would know what to do. We decided that we would probably sell the house and the property because we had several failed attempts when I tried to teach her how to mow with a tractor. So we thought a smaller place might be better. To keep her credit good, we had everything put in her name. The electric bill, the water bill, the gas bill, and that way she had a credit being built up. So my name wasn't on anything, and we tried to pay off everything we had so that we had no debt. We did such a good job of building her credit up that last year I went to buy a car for our company, and they wanted me to sign for it personally. And they ran a credit check, and the little credit manager came back and he said, Mr. Gilly, you have no credit. And I said, well, we put everything in my wife's name. And he said, but you have no loan repayments or anything. I said, well, we paid everything off, and we did that on purpose. He said, oh, your wife? Well, I ran her credit check too. She has very good credit. And I said, I know, but we were trying to, he said, would you mind taking this home and having her co-sign for you? So I did. When my dad first met Libby, he said of her, you know, with Libby, every day is a holiday and every meal is a banquet. That's a pretty good summary of her life. Libby's first real job was at the Red Food Store in Rossville. Y'all remember the old Red Food Store? She was a cashier, and the only complaint I ever heard from her manager was that her lines were so long and the other cashiers had nothing to do. And so she was never able to take a break or eat lunch, and so the manager began to put the cashiers who were no longer busy in Libby's line, and they would stand in the back and turn people away and say, she has to take a break. And that's how he stopped it. Years later, principals had that same problem because parents would call the schools and say, I want my child in Libby's classroom. You know, during high school, we were always good friends. We wound up on the same committees and planning proms and dances and parties together. Libby was very popular, very smart in high school. She was valedictorian of the class. She was homecoming queen. You name it, she was it. I was friends with Libby, and so by association, I was popular. So some things never change. Sorry, my mouth gets dry. Our first date. Just bear with me just a minute. She was in college. She was home for the summer. I asked her out, and I borrowed my mom's Chrysler New Yorker because it had a really big front seat with no console in the middle. Y'all remember that, don't you? So things were going according to plan. I picked her up at the Pastorium at Flintstone Baptist Church. We came down Happy Valley Road and we hit a traffic jam. Okay, there was one other car, but still, it was a traffic jam. And I noticed in a few minutes, and I was trying to decide, can we make our reservations over in East Ridge? Can we make that on Brainerd Road to be able to get out to eat, or am I going to miss it? And there's no way around it. There was no 2A, all the other stuff there is now. And so I noticed in front of that, there was a wreck. And I saw someone, I think I recognize her. And I looked up, and it was Helen Hawkins, at that time Helen Buckner, who had hit a cow. She killed it, and then wrecked her car. And so I got out, and I said, that's a friend of mine, I need to go help her. So I got out, walked up, and she was very upset. And she came running up, and she was really nervous and scared, and she put her arms around me, and she said, I am so glad to see a familiar face. I'm scared to death. I've called my dad. He's coming down. I've hit this cow. And then she went on to tell me that this was evidently the first cow she had killed. A few months earlier, she'd killed another. I don't know what it is about cows. But she continued to hold on to me and was sobbing and very scared. And so pretty soon, her dad shows up. The cow gets gone. The traffic jam in Flintstone gets cleared up. So we're on our way to our date. Things have changed, though. Now Libby is sitting on the other side of the car, and her arms are folded. And, you know, I was using my powers of deduction to try and figure out what happened. I said, everything okay? And she said, fine. I said, something wrong? She said, nothing. So I'm thinking, that's good, you know. In a few minutes, she was sitting there, and she said, who was that girl? I said, well, that was a friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time, since we were in church, at the same church, since we've been in diapers. And she said, why was she hugging you? I said, well, she was just upset because she had a wreck. And she said, she must have been very upset. And so, except for that incident, Helen, thanks. Where'd you go? We did have a second date after that. In hindsight, I probably should have said, when she said, who was that girl? I probably should have said, that's your future best friend. I should introduce you to her. So even after that bad date, we eventually got married. We were married in '79. And soon after, Libby began to teach. She had her first job at Howard Elementary. I saw Miss Coleman in here earlier. And she loved teaching. She found her true calling. Now, we had our first argument, I guess, disagreement, because she decided she wanted to bring at least 2 or 3 children home every weekend for the whole year until she could go through her whole class. And her class, because a lot of these children came from broken homes, and she said, we can teach them what a family could be like. And so we had this discussion about minors and crossing state lines and liability coverage and lawyers and litigation. And I finally convinced her that probably wasn't the best idea. But the episode with the children from Howard tells you about her love and how she fell in love with her kids. And then she had her own. And then she fell in love more deeply. She taught at Graysville Elementary in Catoosa County and at Chattanooga Valley Elementary. my boys found great pleasure in hearing stories that Libby would tell about children in her class. Especially one little boy, I'll call him Jonathan, who had a lot of behavior problems. He would kick and scream and just do all sorts of things. I remember one day she was telling us that Jonathan was really unruly. He had kicked Libby in the shins and had tried to bite her arm, and Libby sat with him with her arms around him the whole recess and said, "Miss Libby loves you, and I want you to be obedient." Well, after that incident, they didn't go to recess. His mom called the school and had the little boy taken out of the school. She said, "That teacher, Miss Gilly, is just too hard on my child." And so that night, Libby got on the phone and she called the other school where they had taken the child to and wanted to find out who the teacher was. She found out the teacher that was going to be teaching Jonathan from then on. And I thought, well, good. She's going to tell this teacher, tell her what this kid's like. Well, no, the conversation was, can you talk to Jonathan's mom and see if you can get her to bring Jonathan back? She said, I think I'm making a change in his life, and I don't want him to get lost in the system. That's the kind of teacher that she was. Later, as the boys grew up, Libby stopped working, stayed at home with the kids, and we always wanted to have our house to be the house where the kids wanted to go. We wanted stuff for them to do. We didn't want our kids going to someone else's house and not knowing where they were, what they were doing. We wanted them to come to our house. And, of course, being boys, we had the kids from Chattanooga Christian School, I see a bunch of them here today, that would come to the house and we built floats. We built homecoming floats. We built zip lines, and we had parties and cookouts and cross-country parties and trees and forts and ramps and even a few bombs. And one of the oddest conversations I ever heard was when Libby was talking to one of the parents, explaining to some of the parents, that our boys were not allowed to set off, were only allowed to set off small explosives. But all large concussion bombs, and especially fireballs, had to have a parent supervising the detonation. Recently, on a Sunday afternoon, a lot of the guys from one of the classes came by just to see Libby. She was in the bed, in the hospital bed, and in the living room, and they had been in to see her, and they were walking around, and in a few minutes, she didn't see them anymore. She said, "Where'd all the boys go?" So I looked around and was trying to find them. I said, "Well, they're standing in front of the refrigerator with the door open, looking for something to eat." And she said, "Sounds like old times." Libby always had a knack for getting people to help, as the pastor said, in ministries in the church. Adults and children fell under that spell. One of the guys here, Brian Richardson, when he was young, his mom Mary told me that Brian came home one night. He was probably 5 or 6. He was real upset, and she asked him why he was so upset. And he said, "Well, I have all this schoolwork, homework, basketball practice, and now I've got to learn lines for a play." And she said, "Well, Brian, if you had so much to do, why did you agree to do it?" He said, "Because Miss Libby asked him to." Mary said, "I understand that, Brian, but again, why did you say you would do it?" He said, "Mom, you don't say no to Miss Libby." For the past 20 years or so, my job has allowed Libby and I to travel a lot with our company. And we would go to the Tennessee Bankers Convention or the Tennessee Credit Union League. And the bankers meeting every year just happens to be on our anniversary. And so my job at these meetings was to set up a booth and to promote our business to other bankers to get them to come and let us build a building for them. So each year on our anniversary, we celebrated in places like Bermuda or the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs or the Greenbrier or the Breakers in Palm Beach. And instead of being upset that she was sharing her anniversary with about 400 other people, Libby would always take the boys and they would go to the beach or to the pool and they would meet everyone there. Yeah, there was no one they didn't meet. And so that night at dinner, and they had everyone come back in for a big dinner, and I would be telling them, I might tell Libby, well, these are some guys that I tried to meet today. And I had good luck meeting this guy or whatever. I was in the booth. And so as dinner went on, Libby would take me and introduce me to the wives that she had met at the pool or at the beach. And it never failed. She would meet 10 times as many people as I had met. And we'd walk around and she'd introduce me to the wives, and the wives would turn to their husband and say, this is the sweet family that I met at the pool today. Remember that main office we were going to build with our bank? I think we need to use these people. See, I always thought I was doing a good job in selling. We'd been warned. This is going to be the toughest part, okay? Bear with me. We'd been warned after the initial diagnosis that through the radiation, the chemo, and everything that we were doing, that if the cancer came back, it would be very bad very quick. So when we were told last Thanksgiving, that it had come back, I asked Libby, I said, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, I can take some time off. I've got some money saved. So what do you want to do? You want to go to Europe? You want to go to Hawaii? You want to go to the Caribbean? You want to go to all three? We'll just take a couple of months off and we'll go. We'll have fun. Kind of a bucket list type trip. She said, you know, what I really want to do is get the children's program at church set up and organized so well that a new church leader and continue the program long after I'm gone. That's who you all knew as Libby, and I knew as my best friend.